Welcome to another episode of Dad Up, everyone. Thank you guys very much for joining me. I'm excited. I just got connected with this individual, and I already feel like even just he and I just kind of doing a little chit chat before we started recording here. I feel like we've known each other for 20 years, but I'm really excited to have him on. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's really big in his faith. He's got a great family, and I'm excited to just kind of dive into all that, not only for me, but for you guys. But my good friend, Mr. Kent Evans, is joining me on Dad Up. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, Bryan, thanks for having me, man. I'm excited to be here. You
Yeah,
do great work.
thank you very much, man. So do you. And I'm really excited to do this. Let's just dive in. Let's kind of get a little backstory on you first, and then we'll kind of dive into what you've been up to and the things that you've been doing as far as your, the books you've written and some of I see Manhood Journey behind you. So I want to kind of dive into that as well. So let's dive in a little bit of back journey. And then I want to know about your family. You're a dad, you're a
Yeah.
husband. I want to know about your family as well.
Yeah. Well, that's where I'll start, man. My wife, April, and I have been married 29 years, or a couple of months from now, we'll celebrate our 30th wedding anniversary,
Wow.
Lord willing. If Jesus doesn't come back between now and then, we'll celebrate 30 years in April of this year. I married April. We got engaged in April. We got married in April. Her name is April. So I just decided to keep all that pretty simple because, I have a finite amount of brain cells, and she's amazing. I have been super blessed. God's greatest gift to me on earth is my wife, April, by a mile. We have 5 sons. Their ages 25 down to 9. And they're at the life stages you'd expect. The 25-year-old's married. We have an amazing daughter-in-law. And then the 22-year-old's in college. The 20-year-old's in college just got engaged. We have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. So life is busy. Life is great. And we're a future husband factory, we call it, here at our address in Louisville, Kentucky.
That's awesome. Oh, 5 boys. Holy cow. I got to tell you, I have 2 boys and then they're both grown. I have a 25 or 26 now and 23-year-old. When we were just talking, it's so funny you mentioned 5 boys because we were just talking about it. My wife and I were just talking, we were talking about this with my younger son. He and his girlfriend were sitting here. We were having dinner, our New Year's Day dinner. My wife makes a nice roast and all that kind of stuff. We were just sitting at the table talking, and we were sharing stories about Brett, my son. And my wife was so convinced because we'd already had Blake. My wife was so convinced the way she was carrying when she
Ah,
was pregnant with Brett, she was so convinced that he was a girl
right.
that we went to the day we were going to find out on the ultrasound. We went to Baby Gap, and my wife was insistent on getting all these girl baby clothes. And she had a pile of them. I swear to God, it was several hundreds of dollars worth of baby clothes. And she gave it
Great.
to the cash register lady. She said, I want to put on these on hold because I'm going to the doctor right now to find out the sex, but I know it's a girl. And then as soon as we get the sex that it's a girl, we're going to come back and I'm going to get all this stuff. Lady said, not a problem. Go do the ultrasound. And yeah, it didn't go as
Oh
planned.
no.
The
Right.
uh, the text
Great.
said, "Well, he really wants you to know that he's a boy."
There we
Let's
go.
just put
Pretty
it that way.
obvious. Yeah,
And
pretty obvious.
my wife, God bless her, she started crying because she really was convinced it was a girl. She said, "Are you sure?" And the text said, "Yeah, no, I'm sure.
Oh,
He's
that's great.
really, really wanting to show you." So
That is great.
I was laughing. I thought it was funny, but my wife wouldn't have it any other way. She loves her boys. She's glad that she has 2 boys, but we had a little bit of complications with both pregnancies and opted not to carry on. We opted to stop right there. But I will say that if we had continued, I would probably be on the same road as you with
Yeah.
5 boys. That
Yeah.
seemed to be the direction we were going, and so that's awesome. That's cool, and you got a wide range too. That's a big gap.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
between 25 and 9, that's a big, big gap. But how cool! That's a great journey for you because you're getting to experience not only the what I call the adulting side of parenthood, right, where you're more
Yeah.
the counselor and the advisor, right, and the actual parenting side of parenthood, right?
Yeah.
Where you're actually still
Yeah.
trying to raise somebody to be a good human being. So really, really cool. Um, let's dive further. Let's talk about how that journey has gone for you over your life, and brief summary over your life, and then where it's led you today in
Mm.
through Manhood Journey, and then through the books
Yeah.
you've written, and then we're going to dive into those books as well.
Yeah. If I rewind the clock about 30 years, when April and I met, I was in college and I didn't really have a relationship with the Lord. And I chased this pretty girl into church. And she was like, if you want to be around me, you're gonna have to come to church. I'm like, cool, I'll do whatever it takes. So In that case, I kind of look at it, Bryan, like God baited the hook with this beautiful young lady, and He knew what He was doing, and I got her and Jesus in the process. So in college, I really met the Lord for the first time in a way that was significant. Started reading God's Word, reading the Bible, and spending more time in prayer. And so in my early 20s is when I really started to find my faith and find my footing, in terms of direction for life. Not that there was some like, cloud that opened and I had 30 years all planned out, far from it. But it became clear that God wanted me, like Ephesians 2:10 says that He's prepared good works in advance for us to do. And so He just started laying those out one at a time. And I am a business guy. I still call myself a business guy, even though I run a ministry in the sense that, I'm managing strategy, I'm managing communication, I'm managing web and that kind of thing. I just happened to do it today in the context of a fatherhood ministry. So the ministry we lead is called Manhood Journey, and we produce resources to help dads disciple their families. Markedly, we call it biblical fatherhood, not because we invented that term, but because it helps people understand we're not like a basic fatherhood ministry where you learn how to do, change your tire and tie a bow tie and max out your 401k. That's not what we teach. And we're not a men's ministry. We're really focused on dads, very, very focused on dads. And we're focused on dads who want to disciple their kids in the Lord.
Mm.
So that's what we've been producing, man, for about 15 years now, around 14 years now. We have been producing resources for dads, and it's my full-time gig. We raise money. It's a 501. We're a nonprofit. It is what it is. It's a blast. And we just crossed over the year at the time of recording this episode, and we'll have reached almost 2 million dads worldwide by the time this episode goes live in some form or fashion with either a blog post or a podcast or a book. So we love what we're doing, man. It's a blast. It's messy. It's sloppy. I do it very imperfectly. If you come to my house, you'll find some interesting moments as a dad, for sure. I'm not the role model. Jesus is the role model. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's one of the things that I was intrigued by with you is that anytime that I come across another individual that is really striving to not only is big into his faith and growing biblically with his family, but also really trying to help improve the culture of dad, what I call dadhood, right? The
Mm-hmm.
parenthood and dadhood. And when I came across you, actually, one of your I guess your publicist, whatever, reached out to me and asked about having you on. And I started doing some research and because we vet everybody that we have on the show,
Sure.
and I started doing some research. And I'm like, this dude's cool. This dude's good. He's got good head on shoulders. He's got the same kind of ideas and opinions as I do. He wants to have accomplished the same goals as I do as far as helping other dads strive to be better, and just kind of two different areas, but kind of following the
Mm.
same mission. And
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it's really, really, really neat. And I'm like, I definitely have to get to know this guy. I definitely got to have him on. And so that's awesome. I'm glad you guys are doing that. You guys have been doing it a while. That's very cool. I've been doing this show now for a little over 5 years.
Yeah.
And I started it basically because I felt like my dad journey was ending, right? I know you're familiar with the show and all that, but my listeners know that I talk about it all the time. Listen, I felt like my dad journey was ending. My boys were going off
Yeah.
to college. My boys were doing their own thing. I was independent now with my wife. We were, good, great empty nesters. But at the same time, I felt like, okay, all I've known is dad. That's all I've known. Now
Right.
what? Now what do I do?
Yeah.
And it was brought to my attention that, hey, you need to start helping other dads. And that's kind of how the
Oh, it's
journey
great.
started for the podcast. And it's been an absolute blast. And one of the things that I love most about it is hearing other dads' journeys and their
Mm.
stories and how they've raised their kids and the things that they've done. And I've picked up things along the way and went, wow, I should have done that. I should have, why didn't I think of that? You know,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I get to meet people like you, Kent, that are kind of trying to do good, not only in how you're doing good professionally as far as your career and all that kind of stuff, but also trying to do well for your family and trying to bring up the best human beings you can and be there
Mm.
for them in the right way. So kudos to you, brother.
Hey, same for you, man. I've been following your podcast and love what you do. Huge fan. And 5 years is actually puts you probably in the 1% of all people who start a podcast in terms of their willingness to stick with it and feel like they're called and led and stay with it over a long enough period of time. We've been going maybe 2.5 years or so ourselves, or three. And so I know it can be a grind. It can be a long road. And so, man, way to go. Proud of you, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a grind. And anybody that my son started a podcast for sports. He calls it the Never Lost Podcast. And he started it a couple years ago. And I think he lasted 5 episodes. And then he just kind of, it
It's a
just
lot of
didn't.
work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of
I
work.
tried to tell him that. I said, look, dude, it's a lot of work. You got to be willing
Mhm.
to put in the time. But anyways, um, all right. So enough about kind of your backstory, getting to know you, and talk a little bit about your family. We're going to dive more into that in a little bit. But one of the things that I wanted to bring up to you, like I said, I don't typically do this. I really like to keep these conversations very general and open, and just kind of go off the cuff. But I've written specific questions down because there's a couple things that I really like about what you've done. And he's an author and he's written some books. And one of the books that caught my attention was the one before the one that's out now. And I want you to
Mhm.
talk about it. But it's called the Bring Your Hammer 28 Tools That Dads Can Grab from the Book of Nehemiah.
Yeah.
I thought the title was intriguing. And what else I thought was really neat about it was the book of Nehemiah. For those of you that don't know, the book of Nehemiah doesn't necessarily specifically talk about how to be a parent. It's more about rebuilding a city. It's more about rebuilding a community. And what he has done, what Kent has done, is he's kind of, and I don't want to say twisted. Twisted's kind of the wrong word, but he's kind of I have formed it into a way to relate it to parenthood and how to be a dad, and the tools that you can really use to bring up your family, to build up your family, like you're building that community, like you're rebuilding
Mm.
the city, right? And one of the things that I talk about as a husband and as a father and as a family man, and I've talked about this many times on my show, is that I'm a firm believer in the foundation of our home, or foundation of our family, is the foundation of our life and how we live it.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is that if there's any type of cracks in that foundation in our family, if there's any types of cracks, those cracks can ultimately spread, and that spreading of those cracks can lead to other things outside of our family. So if you're in a bad marriage, a bad relationship, or you have bad relationship with your kids, that can ultimately lead to a bad environment as far as your business goes and how you run your business. It can lead to things that you might be getting yourself into outside the home when it comes to maybe addiction, things like that. It can lead to those sorts of things. And that's what I mean by any cracks in our foundation. So for you and the way that you've written this book, I think that having those I guess fixing those cracks, rebuilding that city, right? As
Mm.
as the book of Nehemiah talks about, rebuilding the city and rebuilding the community. There's a lot of tools that we need in our arsenal in order to do that.
Mm.
And you talk about 28 tools that
Mm.
dads can use to rebuild. And I bring that up because I want to say that I love the title of the book. I love the premise behind the book. I love the fact that you're helping dads in that way, but also forming it into in a biblical sense.
Mm.
Am I making sense of
Yeah.
what I'm
Well,
saying?
what I think's interesting about the book of Nehemiah, specifically that particular book in the Bible, is people associate it with him rebuilding the wall, which is only the
Right.
first portion of the book.
Right.
So if you actually read the rest of Nehemiah, what you find is it's mostly about how he governs the people of
Right.
Jerusalem. It's not just about the 56 days or 58 days of rebuilding the wall. It's about the 10 to 12 years after that,
Mhm.
where he governs this city using principles that look like fatherhood principles. And the reason
Mhm.
they look like fatherhood principles is not because Nehemiah was a dad. We have no evidence to suggest that he was, but because there's only one father since the beginning of time, God the Father, and he has certain characteristics about himself. And kind of taking family leadership aside and just realizing, man, when I'm living fully out of my identity in the Lord, I'm going to look like a father figure. Whether I
Mhm.
have kids or not isn't the point. The point is, I'm going to look more and more like God the Father, because it's His Spirit living in and through me that I live out of. I don't live in my own flesh. I live now in Christ, as the New Testament would say. So, therefore, anytime we're looking at the topic of fatherhood, we're actually looking at the topic of God's identity, which is why there's been a battle for fatherhood identity since the dawn of time, right?
Mhm.
Satan doesn't just want families or kids or marriages, which he does. But what he wants is he wants the identity, he wants the image of God the Father. He wants to be the Father. And Jesus gave him as much because he called him the father of lies. And so
Right.
he is a father, no question. Satan's a father, just father of all the bad things. So when we look at the book of Nehemiah, it's very, very easy to pull fatherhood lessons out of any portion of scripture because they're not really fatherhood lessons. They're lessons about God the Father. And
Mhm.
as we're living those out, so like, for example, when Nehemiah is he's in his palace basically as the cupbearer to the king, and his brother comes and visits, and Nehemiah says, "Hey man, how's it going back home?" And he says, "Really bad." Nehemiah, his first knee jerk reaction is to confess and pray,
Mhm.
which is really interesting when you go, "Hey man," so let's say a dad's listening to this show right now, Bryan, and he's got kids that are older than just say 5 or 6 years old. You got late single digits, 9, 10 year olds or teenagers. When your kid brings you bad news, what is your knee jerk reaction? Is it anger? Is it disappointment? Is it, "I'll go give that teacher a piece of my mind. That coach doesn't give you enough playing time anyway"? How do you react
Mhm.
when news comes your way? And here's the question: do you react like Nehemiah? Do you start with confession and prayer? Do you start to realize, man, yeah, your coach might not be the nicest coach in the world, but man, I also have been a jerk 1,000 times in my life. So I'm going to cut your coach a little bit of slack. Secondly, let's pray about this and pray about what our response ought to be like. Nehemiah didn't go into planet mode and fix the wall mode and how much wood and lumber was he going to need mode. First, he prayed. First, he prayed. When I read it one time about 10 years ago, just fatherhood lessons jumped off the page at me, and I just had to put them in a book.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. So is that really the inspiration behind it? Is it your own kind of journey and the things maybe the struggles, some of the struggles you were going through? Is that kind of what inspired you to write the book?
Yeah, basically, as I went through a Bible study on Nehemiah. It was about 8 or 10 years ago, or so mid 40s, and I just remember as I was going through the study, it's a little bit like the part of your brain, the reticular activating system, that
Hmm.
causes you to notice things. Behind you in the camera, there's a model of Notre Dame. You might not even notice it very much anymore, but it's one of the first
Right.
things I noticed when we got on video because I'm seeing it for the first time. You were seeing it for the thousandth time, perhaps. So our brain turns things off, right? For me, the topic of fatherhood is now, it's like, you get in a red car and all you see are red cars.
Right.
They were there before. It's not like they just showed up. It's just you just started noticing them. And so for me, as I was reading through the book of Nehemiah, I just read it like a dad. I was reading
Mm.
it as a father, and I was reading it on behalf of the fathers that we minister to. And I was thinking, man, there's a lot in this book that dads can learn from: courage, prayer, discipline, confrontation, peace, Sabbath, honoring the Sabbath. It's all in the book of Nehemiah. Fascinating read.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've had a handful, I mean, probably more than a handful of dads that have been on my show that have said, one of the things that is frustrating to me as a dad is that there's no manual on how to be a dad. And I've had to correct them and go, I know what you mean, but I actually disagree with you. And I've had to say, look, the one thing that I think that dads can pick up as a manual for how to be a dad is the Bible, and start reading that. Even if you're not even fully understanding what the Bible is saying to you, start reading and start
Yeah,
applying the principles that are within the Bible. And the second that you start applying those principles within the Bible, you're going to be amazed at the transformation between how you
yeah,
are as a dad now and how you are as a dad after you start doing that, and how your
yeah.
relationship starts to improve. So
Oh, yeah,
yes, there is a manual on how to be a dad or how to be a parent, and I'm a firm believer in it being the Bible. You just
yeah.
have to be able to
Well,
be willing to pick it up.
I have a good friend named Greg, and one of the ways he likes to say it is the people of Israel understood God's laws, but Moses understood God's ways. And
Mm.
if you go look at the experience that Moses had, that was very unique throughout the Old Testament, not many people had a very Moses like experience with God like Moses did. Moses didn't just understand God's like quote unquote playbook, the Ten
Mhm.
Commandments or this or that, or the rules or the law, the Levitical law. What he understood God's heart and
Mm.
God's methods and God's approach. And so for us, to your point, while the Bible may not read like, hey, when they're 11, do this, when they're
Right.
15, do this, here's how to teach them to drive, but that chapter would be an interesting chapter. It does tell us about God's ways. And so when we look at the scripture as a guidepost for not just what does God say to do, but how does God think and behave? And this is like for me, we get into the topic of wisdom, which is one of my favorite topics. But bottom line is when I get to the place where I'm aligned, like a lunar eclipse, when I'm
Mm.
perfectly aligned with God's ways, then I am wise. I'm behaving in a spirit of wisdom. And it
Mm.
may look differently with my 13-year-old than your 13-year-old or your daughter and my son. And it may look differently, but I believe God gives us what we need in the moment. And to your point, yeah, it's not like the playbook or rule book we're all looking for, but it does tell us exactly how God is, and it shows us his character, which is what we really need to evince as dads.
Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. Absolutely agree. I want to ask you a couple questions and then we're going to dive into your current book because the book that we're referencing right now, and I always want to make sure I get the title right, but Bring Your Hammer, 28 Tools Dads Can Grab from the Book of Nehemiah. That book came out in what, 21, 22?
Yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's been out a couple years. But he has another book that just recently came out. But I want to ask you, can you just give us one little tip or one little tool that you wrote about in your book that dads could take away right now that may intrigue them to maybe go pick that book up?
Oh, yeah. When I think about Nehemiah, I think that one of the things that we tend to associate with him, which is true, it's just not all the truth, is we associate like power or conviction. Or a lot of people will preach Nehemiah from the position of like kind of kick butt and take names, and he didn't mess with Tobias and Sanballat, and he didn't. All right, true, all true, all true. However, Nehemiah's starting point was humility.
Hmm.
His starting point was humility. So he even asked God, what a fascinating moment. But the Bible doesn't always give us such crisp timelines. We don't know exactly when some things happen. We know when a lot happened, but not all. The first couple of chapters of Nehemiah tell us the months on the Hebrew calendar. We know when chapter 1 started. We know when chapter 2 starts.
Hmm.
These months, it's about 4 or 5 months apart on the Hebrew calendar. And what you find is Nehemiah bided his time and he waited and he thought and he planned and he confessed and he prayed before he got his audience with King Artaxerxes. And then when Artaxerxes said, hey, man, you look kind of sad. Nehemiah goes, yeah, Jerusalem's in terrible shape. And Artaxerxes says, what do you want? Nehemiah goes, bam, 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 bam. Nehemiah was ready. And the reason he was ready is because he confessed and he prayed and he asked God for direction. So for a lot of dads, we're trying to get the dad thing right. And one of the ways we can do that is approach it in a spirit of humility. Not so much just like, the macho dad who's going to kick butt and take names and defend his family. Okay, cool, do that. Like, don't forget that. However, let's start from a position of prayerful humility as dads. And that's one of the things that often gets overlooked in the story of Nehemiah, because the rest of the book, he's he's a pretty dominant figure in the rest of the book. But man, the foundation is humility.
Yeah. And do you think humility when it comes to us and our own, families, for me, when I think about, humility, I think about the willingness to be able to say, hey, I messed up. I made a mistake. I'm sorry, and I'm going to try to do better. I think about it like that. Is that the sense that you're trying to go
Yeah,
with?
I would say for purposes of brevity, I would say two things. One, fully agree what Bryan just said. The second thing about humility is just that you acknowledge, and I'm going to tie it back to Bryan. We've surveyed thousands of dads over the last 5 years, and there's a theme in these surveys that is unmistakable. And one of the themes is, and I'm going to assume that your listenership is like the guys who listen to our show or subscribe to our emails. They struggle to communicate with their kids as their kids get older.
Mhm.
We see it over and over and over again. My teenager won't talk to me. They give me one word answers. I can't open them up. I can't get them to communicate. Every talk starts leads it to a fight, and then it bleeds into young adulthood, and they have like almost no relationship with their 20 somethings.
Mhm.
Humility is the key to communication, because if you come across, I'm 50, I know more than you, I've been on this planet longer than you've even thought about being alive. If that's how you communicate, you shut people down.
Mhm.
So the reason that most teenagers will not talk with their parents is because most parents are talking at their teenagers instead of
Correct.
talking with their teenagers. Proverbs 20, verse 5 says that the purposes of a man's heart are like deep water, and a man of understanding draws them out. And if you think about how people got water in the Old Testament, it was not simple. It was not like you turn a faucet and things happen. You had
Right.
to get the jar. You had to go to the well. It might be miles away. You had to put the jar down. You had to carry it back. That's a picture of how to pull out the purposes of someone else's heart. And so for us as dads, humility is not just admitting when we make mistakes. Absolutely, no question. But humility is, man, I probably don't understand what it's like growing up in, a social media covered world, even though we sheltered our kids a lot. So I probably need to be asking more questions than making more statements. And so as your kids hit teen years, humility becomes a secret weapon as far as communication goes.
Mhm. I love that. And I think about as you're talking about that and how we talk to our, especially our teenagers. I think about a time where I had an instance with one of my boys. He was going through he had a tough time in his freshman year of high school, and I could tell that he wasn't himself. He wasn't the same. We talk all the time and all that, but he was starting to close up a little bit. He was starting to shut down. And I had to make sure that when I talked to him, I approached him in a delicate manner because I want to make sure that I wasn't coming across as, hey, you need to be talking to me, you need to open up to me. I wanted to give him the opportunity to open up to me, not force it out of him, right? And I had to really sit down and try to be at his level. Number one of the things that I tell parents all the time is when you're talking to your kids, talk to them at their level. So if you've got a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, don't stand over them and talk to them. Get down to their level and make them feel like they're one of your equals, not that you're in power or you're in control. You make them feel like they're one of your equals. So that was the first thing I had to do. I had to get right at his eye level, and I had to say, listen, son, I know something's going on. I know something's going on. You're struggling with something right now, and I'm okay if you don't want to talk about it. That's okay with me. But I want you to know, and I just left it wide open for him. I
Yeah.
want you to know, and my boys played sports their whole life. So I always brought it back to a sports analogy, but I said, I want you to know that I am always on your team. I am always on your team. And if there's anything that you've done or haven't done that you want to talk to me about or that you're scared to talk to me about, I just
Yeah.
want you to know that I will help you through it because I'm your teammate. And I also told him, I said, hey, I'm not saying that I won't be disappointed. There may be some disappointment, but it does not mean that I love you any less or love you anymore. It just means that, hey, everybody goes through these situations where they have little bits of
Mm-hmm.
disappointment. But
Yeah.
I want you to know that I'm on your team and you can talk to me about anything that's on your mind. And it turns out after I said that, I walked out of the room, and it was probably a day or so later that he finally came to me and told me that he was going through some stuff at school where he was being bullied, and
Mm.
he was afraid to approach it with me because he's a pretty tough kid, but he just didn't know how to handle the situations he was going through. And guess what? I said, "Cool, let's get it handled." And we
Mm.
worked through it, and within a matter of just a couple short weeks, I ended up making some changes for him that put him on the path to the right track, and he was great after that. But my point in sharing that story is that if I had came in there and said, listen, dude, I don't know what's going on with you, I don't know what your problem is, but you've had attitude. You've been closed up. You've been hanging out in your room. I don't want you hanging out in
Yeah.
your room anymore. You're going to sit out here with me and your mom. I need you talking to me. I mean, if I forced that into him, he would have shut down even more to where he probably would have ran away. He
Yeah.
probably would have run from home
Yeah.
because now he
Yeah.
can't
That's
trust me.
humility in action.
Yeah,
That's
he
humility in
can't
action.
trust me. And he needed somebody that he could trust. And that's why I just said, you can trust me. I'm on your team. I don't care if we win or lose. I'm on your team. I'm here in it with you just as much as you are. So I love that. I want to switch gears like real quick because I want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about not only your newest book but also Manhood Journey and all that. And I want to be respectful of your time, but that little bit that I just went over with the audience here and asked them that question about the tools in his book that he wrote a couple years ago was because it's a little bit of a teaser. I want you guys to go get it so you guys can pick it up and read a little bit more about it because it's fascinating. But let's dive into the next one because I think that your book now that you have out now is something that is a little bit of a it's not so much parenting, but you can relate it to parenthood and how successful you are in not only raising your family and all that, but also how you raise yourself and how you treat yourself and
Yeah.
how you are as an individual and how to make what I like to say is how to get just 1% better every day. If I could just get 1% better every day, imagine where I'll be a year from now. I think about that in my own journey now, where last year I was 90 pounds heavier than I am today. And it's because I
Nice.
focused on just getting 1% better every single day. And today, with all the running that I've done and exercising and all these different things that I took care of when I took care of my body, is I said, look at where I'm at now. And 2 days ago, I hit the 90 pound mark, which is insane for me. I never thought I would be down to this weight. But anyways, your newest book, it's called Don't Bench Yourself: How to Stay in the Game Even When You Want to Quit. And that could be related to parenthood, right? That could be
Yeah.
related to being a dad. There's a lot of
Yeah.
dads out there that want to quit.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, and I'll put this in a really brief comment so we can wrap as soon as you need to. But most men, I find, do not withdraw from an area of their life of significance and value because someone tells them to.
Mm.
Most men withdraw from areas of significance and value and importance because they decide to. So what happens is a guy is raising teenage kids and he doesn't do it well, and his kids say they hate him and they don't want to ever be like him and all that, and they go through all the drama. And so the dad says, well, screw that. I'm just going to go get better at work. I'm going to go make more money. I'm going to go lower my golf handicap. I'm going to go, do something else with my time. And that is, in essence, benching yourself. It's almost like, if you could put it in a sports metaphor, take your favorite player on a sports team these days. It's LeBron James or Steph Curry or whoever, if you're an NBA fan. We just went to a game the other night, saw Giannis play for the first time in Indiana, the Bucks against the Pacers. And you watch a guy like Giannis play, and the whole first half, he might have scored 5 or 6 points. Wasn't very dominant and did not have a great first half. Second half, he scored about 26. Bucks come back from 15 down or more. They win the game because Giannis didn't quit. Imagine if in the third quarter, Giannis missed, his 4th shot in a row and then said, you know what, screw this, I'm out. And he takes off his shoes, he walks off the court, and he just sits down on the bench. That is a picture of what a lot of men do. And they do it in the areas of husbanding, and it's usually through some diversion. It's pornography or it's gambling or it's something super illicit and dark, or they just go into something that's valuable, but they're giving it an inordinate amount of time, whether it's a hobby or their work or their passions. And they go, you know what? I can't be a great husband, so I'm just going to be a great fantasy football manager or something completely insignificant, right? No offense if you love fantasy football. Or as a dad, they figure, you know what? I'm going to go make the money, and I'm going to let the Christian school principal or the youth pastor give Jesus to my kids, when that is, in fact, your primary responsibility as a dad is to disciple your children in the Lord. Right. So as such, any time not spent doing that is time spent doing questionable activity. So for us as men and as dads, we've got to recognize that often we're tempted to pull ourselves out of the game of being a husband and a father, and we just got to remember Galatians 6:9. Do not grow weary in doing well, for in due time, in due season, you will reap a harvest if you do not give up. And so, as a dad and as a man, as you're listening to today's show, I hope that just even today's show and Bryan's podcast, and maybe if you go snag the book, Don't Bench Yourself, somehow it will encourage you to stay in the important and significant areas of your life and stay plugged in to those and don't give up.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's powerful. I think it's super important, especially for any dad that maybe, you know what, this is not only so much for dads. I mean, any mom that's listening to this, you guys have a very tough job as a parent trying to raise. Listen, the Lord gave us our kids as a loan, as a gift, right?
That's right.
These are his children, not ours. They're his children. And so they're loaned to us for us to raise up. And the second that you give up on that, the second that you say, I can't do this anymore, it's over. You've
Yeah.
given up. It's done. It's almost, you almost cannot fix it. And so it's important for us to understand you're going to go through a challenge. You're going to go through this journey where you're going to have heartbreak. You're going to have hurt. You're going to have challenges. You're going to have times where you think that things can't get any better. And I'm telling you that you just, like he said, don't bench
Mm,
yourself. I'm telling you, you've got to stay in the game. Just keep
mm,
staying in that grind because things will get better. Things will improve. Things will start to go down the right road that you need them to go down, right? And I think that for dads out there that might be struggling, whether
mm.
it's any type of addiction that he had mentioned, whether it's pornography or gambling or maybe even alcohol. I had an alcohol addiction. I had a problem with drinking alcohol because from the Marines, so I was military kids, military guys, so I spent my time in the Marine Corps learning how to drink, and it carried on a little bit into my kids' early kids' lives, and now 15 years sober. It's something that I'm very proud to say that, hey, I saw that, I had to fix it, I had to change it, not for me, but for my family, and I didn't quit. I stayed in the
Yeah.
game. I didn't give up, and I knew what I had to do in order to make things right. And that was one of the things that I had to do. So if you're struggling with an addiction or something out there, and you need some help, you need some guidance, you can reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help you, walk you through what you need to do in order to get yourself on the path, on the right path. But don't give up. That's all I can
That's
say is
right.
don't quit.
That's right.
Don't quit, because the second that you quit, you've not only quit on you, but you've quit on your family, and your family needs you. And when they see you quit, then they start to go to other places.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
when you do need them, they're not going to be there. I promise you that they're not going to be there. So if you've given up on your kid, he's 12 years old, 13 years old, 14 years old, and he doesn't want to talk to you, he doesn't want to be around you, he doesn't want to hug you anymore when you drop him off at school, that's okay. They're going through a phase. They're going through these times of these trying to figure out themselves. They're trying to be independent. They're trying to figure out who they are separate from mom and dad. And if he doesn't feel like giving you a hug, or he doesn't feel like high-fiving you in front of all his friends and all that stuff, don't worry about it. Don't stress about that stuff. And just realize that the longer you stay in the game, the longer you stay in the game, the longer you stay in the fight, when he starts to come around again, when he starts to hit the early adulthood and he starts to realize, hey, mom and dad aren't so bad after all, you're going to have, like I have with my two boys, two of my best friends. And it's because I stayed in the
Yeah.
game. I didn't give up. I didn't quit. I didn't bench myself. I kept the
Yeah.
fight in. And there were plenty of times, and I'm sure you had them too, Kent, because you have all boys. There were plenty of times when my boys and I butted heads. Man, we wanted to just go
No,
at it.
I've never had that happen. I'm going to have someone in your audience email me. What is this thing called conflict? Because I don't understand it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm telling you, my boys and I have had conflict. We've butted heads.
Yeah,
We've
sure.
felt like we were enemies with each other, but they're two of my best friends. And I know that I would be theirs for them if you were to ask them. I know that they would say me. We go golfing together. We enjoy hanging out with each other. And they're 26 and 23. I still butt heads with them. We still have our little disagreements. But you know what? It's just life. We have to learn to manage through it. So, Kent, I want to ask you, man, can you tell me real quick about Manhood Journey and what that represents, and the story behind that,
Yeah,
and then I'm gonna let you go.
yeah. The brief synopsis is we were trying to create a Bible study that
Mhm.
dads could do with their sons.
Mm.
Really specific, very narrow, because I believe most dads really, well, certainly most dads who have any kind of faith sort of leaning, they want to transfer some of their faith beliefs to their children, and they just don't know how. They feel like they have the desire, they just don't feel like they have the skill. So we made these super simple Bible studies to do with young boys, ages 8, 9, 10, 12 years old. Um, and I've led groups with kids who are in college and high school. It works great for older boys. That was our very first product. We're father-son Bible studies, and that was about 14 years ago. We started launching those on websites. Now we do a bunch of other stuff: books, podcasts, newsletter, godly father assessments. You name it, we got tools for it. And our mission at Manhood Journey is to help dads disciple their children,
Mm.
not to raise them. Those kind of words. I'm not. It's not that those words are bad. It's just that the focus is I want to give my kids every opportunity to choose Jesus. They may
Mm.
or may not. I can't control the outcome, but I can control my level of faithfulness, right? I know a lot of guys who have done everything that they can do, and their kids still make unwise choices at age 18 or 20. There's no guarantee. This is not a vending machine. It's not like you put an ounce of Jesus in and you get a pound of Jesus out. It's not how it works. However, I do want to be found faithful in the part of this job I was supposed to do. And that's give my kids every opportunity to choose Jesus. So we've created a bunch of resources to help dads do just that.
Awesome. Well, it's very cool. Where's the best place for people to look you up, learn a little bit more about you,
Yeah.
maybe pick up the books, any of your books, and even dive a little bit into Manhood Journey?
Yeah. 2 words, man. It's super simple. Manhoodjourney.org. It's manhoodjourney.org, and you'll find all of our stuff there.
Awesome. Well, Kent, I feel like we could probably talk for hours and probably wouldn't cover everything. I definitely want to have you back on for a part two because I think this is really, really important. But thank you very much, man. I'm looking forward to continuing our friendship, and maybe if I'm
Yeah.
ever in your neck of the woods or you're ever out here in Southern California, we'll have to grab a meal
Oh,
together
I
and
would
break some
love that.
bread.
I would totally love that. Bryan, thanks for what you're doing. And thanks for being faithful for 5 years of podcasting, because you don't always get good feedback from men. I know they don't say anything or all they do say is, hey, that one podcast had an error at minute 13. All you get is the criticism. I understand that. But bro, keep going, keep doing what you're doing. You're making a kingdom investment and you really won't see the fruit of it till the other side. So thank you, bro, for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate that. Thank you for what you're doing as well. Listen, guys, this has been another episode of Dad Up. I want to thank my good friend, Mr. Kent Evans, for being on the show. Make sure you guys are checking out his books. You can go to manhoodjourney.org. Check out everything there. You can learn a little bit more about him. You can look up a little bit more about Manhood Journey, and you can also check out all his books. I highly recommend it. We're definitely going to have him back on the show. But if you are not yet subscribed to my show, please make sure you do that so you don't miss any of the awesome guests that I have on each and every week. And as always, I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of Dad Up. Wow, another amazing episode in the books. So much was shared, and I'm truly grateful my guest was able to pour into you to help you elevate your dad game and really dad up. Make sure you bang that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're here, please don't forget to leave me a rating and a review. I always appreciate the feedback. And one last thing, don't forget, your role as a dad is one of the most important roles you have. So if you need a little help or have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website at daduptribe.com or at my Instagram page at Dad Up Podcast. Until next time, everyone, Dad Up.